convention or conference this past weekend was incredible. It was such an honor to be able to be there and to see the struggle for dual and contending power and for the right of African people to feed, clothe, and house their people, and the front of uniting African people all around the world, and this beautiful, beautiful Zenzele consignment store. So I want to thank and also Muteba, who is also from the African People's Socialist Party and also works here in Zenzele. And of course, I want to join in saluting Akilé Anai. And anybody, how many people watched the campaign on social media when Jesse Nevel ran for mayor of St. Petersburg and Akilé Anai ran for District 6 City Council and gave them hell in St. Petersburg, Florida, and are the people's candidates. So I want to salute them. And I want, of course, wow, that's such an incredible number of years, and it's just been an incredible journey. I had the honor of being there at the very founding convention of APSC. And I do want to start by saying that everything that I understand that I'm going to say in this presentation comes from the understanding of Omali Yeshitela and his political theory, his political understandings of worldview that's called African internationalism. And it sees the world through the eyes of the African working class, colonized here and around the world. And of course, I'm not African, but I am an African internationalist. I am proud to be able to adopt that understanding as my own, and it's something that all of us from the white community can adopt. We can begin to see the world as it truly is, and what it is that caused the world to be the way it is now, and what the contradictions are. And so I want to salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela for that. And you know, as we know, there was an incredible movement of African people in the 1960s in what the chairman called the period when revolution was the trend, the main trend in the whole world. When there were the people of Vietnam. I don't know if anybody's been watching the series that's on the PBS, you know, of the Vietnam War. It's incredible. If you haven't seen it, you must. Wow. It is very moving and very powerful to see the Vietnamese people kick the ass of the French in the United States, and you know, and what that meant in the 1960s, but also all around the world, in Cuba, all throughout Africa, all throughout the world, people, oppressed and colonized peoples were struggling for their freedom, for their independence, and that struggle was here inside the borders of the United States, as the chairman tells us. In the African Revolution, the Black Power movement and the Black Revolution of the 1960s, I understand this because, again, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and that movement was crushed. It didn't go out of style. It was crushed by what's called a counterinsurgency, a war against African people, a war against the people on the planet Earth, carried out by the U.S. government, a counterinsurgency that sometimes goes by the name of COINTELPRO, that murdered and assassinated Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Fred Hampton and so many African revolutionaries of that period, and some of whom are still in prison today. So, you know, it crushed the movement, and coming in behind that, as the chairman has summed up, it flooded the African community with crack cocaine and heroin that was coming from Vietnam, that the U.S. was taking out of Southeast Asia as it was waging a counterinsurgency against the people of Vietnam. And that behind that, the U.S. began building prisons and criminalizing everything that the African community does, and building a prison population that now, at its height, has reached 2.5 million people in prison inside the borders of the United States, at least 50% of which are African people, and I believe it's more just from seeing who's actually in prison, and also the most of the rest are indigenous and Mexican people inside these prisons, which are colonial prisons. And so Chairman Omali Yeshitela found himself as a survivor, because he had built the African People's Socialist Party, to, he had the responsibility and the need to solve all the problems of the revolution that got destroyed with this counterinsurgency. And one of them was what to do with the white people. What was going to happen? How could there be an African revolution? And, without, is there a way not to fight the white population while it's fighting the U.S. state power? And so he understood from his political theory that this system, capitalism, and the United States itself, was born on Europe's assault on Africa, as the chairman tells us. Europe was poor, as the chairman tells us. Europe was poor. It was impoverished. It was in feudalism. So how is it that Europe got to be the wealthiest, most powerful nation, white nation on the planet? Well, it was because Europe solved its problem by assaulting Africa beginning in the 1400s, in 1415, and began the trade in African people. First, it stole all of the gold from Africa, and then in just a few years, it began enslaving African people and turning African human beings into commodities, the first commodities, items for sale of this capitalist system. And it was that built the earliest stock markets, like the stock market of Holland, London, which is called the City of London, even still today, and New York stock market. All of this was completely tied to the sale, kidnapping and sale and enslavement of African human beings by the millions. And it was this that created the startup money for capitalism to start. So, this along with the fact that we as white people, of course, participated in this terror against African people, and we participated in the genocide against the indigenous people of this land. And as the chairman asked in this incredible book, and if you can, please get this tonight, called An Uneasy Equilibrium by Chairman Omali Yeshitela, that gives an amazing analysis of the world today and the future for African people in the place of white people in it, too, is mentioned. And that, as the chairman says, and he asks a question in this book, would there be an America without the enslavement of African people and the genocide of the indigenous people? And he, of course, answers that by saying no, 1,000 times no. There could not be an America without that. And it's really important because if you look at our history books, what we're taught in school, that it's always like, well, there was this great economy growing here in America, and there was this sideline little problem that we had of the enslavement of African people and the genocide of the indigenous people, as if that was an anomaly in this whole thing. But the reality is that is what created capitalism and America. Yes. That is in its DNA. Yes. That is of its essence. It can't be reformed because that's the way it's made. Yes. And, the chairman also showed and proved that all white people, all of us, sit on the pedestal of the enslavement and terror against African people, against indigenous people, and against all colonized people on the planet Earth. That's what gave us the opportunity to come to the New World and climb up the so-called ladder of success. Who was on the backs of African people, indigenous people, and others. Everything, every dream, and every aspiration that we've ever had came at the expense of African people. And just look at here, and I appreciate the white people here, because APSC is the party's front in the white community. We are black power and white face. We're part of the party's strategy. This is not about charity. This is not about doing a favor for somebody. This is the part of the strategy of the African People's Socialist Party to win the liberation of all African people around the world and to win Africa back as their homeland. Yes. I support that. Yes. I support that. And part of that is the only thing that is going to destroy this system, which is so violent and hideous. And that because all of us as white people sit on this pedestal of the oppression of African people, that we got our opportunity, our chance to have a house, to have property, to have a job, because African people were enslaved, that we participated in this. This isn't something that the government did. This is something white people did. The government, of course, did do this, but we carried it out voluntarily. We took it on. I was just reading, 11 African people were lynched, terrorized, murdered here in Huntsville. And that was most probably by just, not even something organized like the Ku Klux Klan, just by regular working white people, just like us.
Yeah.
And it's not enough to just go, oh, well, we have to come to terms with this.
Mm-hmm.
No, we have to take responsibility for
Yes.
this. We have to say that we picked up the gun against the indigenous people.
Yes.
We didn't even, they talk about gun controls, but we didn't need guns. We had ropes, we had knives, we had anything. We had trees. We murdered, we tortured, we raped, we pillaged. This is what we have done to the planet Earth, and this is what is the basis of our narrative that says that we are the good. We're the good, we're the rational, and everybody else is evil all around the world. It's completely the reverse. And that this is what we have a responsibility to look at. And, to say that we sided with our own ruling class rather than unite with the struggle of African people. That even though we could have been workers, we could have been poor, our bosses could have been messing us over in every possible way, but we said, no, we're white. We're white. We'll stay with you. We'll give up anything, better that we might have had or struggled for. We'll give it up because we're white, and we're going to say that, and we're going to prove that, and we're going to carry out the will of our own rulers, our own ruling class, and we did that. We did that, and that still happens today. That is the relationship of white people to African people and the people on the planet Earth, and this is what we have to see, and it can't be seen as some tragic thing that somehow people are poor all over the earth. No, people are impoverished because we've got their loot.
Yes.
Because we have killed them, because we have occupied their lands, because we have stolen their resources. And here, inside this country, we have stolen this land, and the indigenous people live on concentration camps called reservations, where people have a life expectancy of 47 years on their own land. This is why we can have property and pass it down from generation to generation. And when we speak to people, when we speak to other white people, and Chairman, uses the term North American because he wants to take it out of a subjective thing. It's our relationship to the state. That we have to show this truth and this reality as the only way forward. The only way forward then is to be able to be under the leadership of the African Revolution and to be organizing other white people just like ourselves to join in solidarity with this. And we also have a responsibility for reparations to African people and returning the stolen loot back to the African Revolution. And I think that is a very, very powerful thing. We sometimes say in APSC that we are organizing the 30% and the 30% of white people. This was our mandate from the African People's Socialist Party, for us to go into white society, to organize other white people, to stand in solidarity with the struggle of African people and the right of African people to their land, and indigenous people to their land here, and African people to their land and resources, stolen resources in Africa, and to work for reparations under the leadership of the African Revolution. So, we say, well, we're organizing the 30%, and when we kind of sort of figure that, there's maybe 30% of the white population that is openly white nationalist, or, is fighting for their place on the pedestal to stay there and to keep African people in the same position. And so there's that sector, the sector that's out in Charlottesville and other places that we see all around us. And then there's maybe 30% of the white population that's in despair, and they are massively addicted to opioids and heroin and committing suicide and alcoholics. And this is such a large number of the white population that now, for the first time in history, the life expectancy of the white population is going down because of that. And that is, they're in despair because they only see a future in a system that's in crisis based on the existence of African and oppressed people around the world. And they see no future because they haven't heard that white people have a chance to join humanity. And so when we say the 30%, the third 30% that we're talking about are those of us who are open, who in some way want to see justice for African people, who want to open this up and talk about it and rectify our relationship to African people and the people on the planet Earth, who want to be part of the future of the world and everybody else, and not be their enemy and not be forced to represent what U.S. imperialism represents around the world. And we're going to penetrate into this other 2/3 as this grows. But the African People's Solidarity Committee and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement are growing, are expanding, and having tremendous influence on this. One of the things that the Chairman Omali Yeshitela, really helps us to understand that is so powerful is that, and he really talks about it a lot in this book, is the question that the struggle is not against racism. And, you know, we can feel really good by saying things like, we're going to show up for racial justice, or we're going to unlearn our racism, or we're going to talk about people of color, which negates the national question that African people are a nation of people, and that you know, all of these different things, that we could take an unlearning racism course and pay $600 and spend the whole weekend. And I'm not saying that we don't have a lot of shit in our heads and in the way we act out, but that is not the question, because what the Chairman is talking about and the African People's Socialist Party is that they are organizing African people as one people all over the world to fight for the liberation, to organize for the liberation of African people. And as the Chairman describes it, African people, like oppressed people any place in the world, are struggling against colonialism, which is represented by the state power of the U.S. government. That African people are fighting for dual intended power, fighting for power over their lives. And the problem is that when the African People's Socialist Party organizations have a verdict that condemn the police murder and have their own people, black people's grand jury, they condemn, or they even condemn to death, the killer cops, but they don't have the state power to carry out the verdict. And so, to me, that is so helpful to understand that just as we would be, as white people, standing in solidarity with the right of Vietnamese people for their liberation in their land, here inside the borders of the United States, we stand against colonialism carried out in our name against African people, and inside the borders of the U.S. and around the world. So every time there's a police murder, every 18 hours of an African person in this city, in this state, in this country, you know, we see that as the colonial police force, the military force of colonialism inside the borders of the United States, carrying that force out against African people. And we have a responsibility. So I find the question of colonialism very, very helpful, because it means that this can be won. If we're just fighting against racism, we will never make it. We will never make it, because we can't cleanse our brains. And then, so what if we do? African people are still being gunned down, still being, you know, packed off into the prisons and murdered and dying and impoverished. And it doesn't change that. It's self-centered. It's like, well, I'm good now. How about you? You know, but it hasn't changed the conditions. But what the African Revolution is about is destroying white power, destroying colonialism, destroying a parasitic system once and for all that's built on the backs of the suffering, 600 years of African people and indigenous people. And so what does that mean for us? It means that we have ability to stand on that side, to be what deepens the crisis of this imperialist system inside white power itself, that we have responsibility and the opportunity to go in there and break away all the other white people that we can win, to stand on the side of African people, not on white power, not on the side of white power, stand with reparations to African people, and to be able to be part of this incredible new world that is being built and fought for by African people, that's going to end a system of the oppressor and the oppressed.
Yes.
That's going to end the system of the colonizer and
Yes.
the colonized.
Yes.
And is going to have a world in which all human beings can live in peace with each other, because nobody lives at the
Yes.
expense of somebody
Yes.
else. That's the only way. That's the only way for us to, that is the only way for us to. And I think that this question of reparations is so key, because we can't stay here and stand here and say, oh, we support you, to African people, but we're still holding on to all the stolen resources and the social wealth, that we are the children of the slave masters living in social wealth and facing the children of the enslaved. And that has to be rectified. That is stolen loot. That did not come from us. And, I know that there are many of us, and I'm sure that nobody in this room is part of the Rockefellers or Bill Gates or, any other of the billionaire ruling class. We're working people. But we still, have to, we're not a ruling class, but we have to acknowledge our ability to live at the top 20% of the population of the planet Earth,
Yes.
based on that fact. And there are many of us who are working people, women. If we see oppression of women, and we see the oppression of LGBTQ, we see what this system is doing to the environment, we have to say, what is going to change that? Because all we get in this system is something for ourselves at the expense of African people, while we still stand on this pedestal of African people and colonialism inside this country and around the world. I don't want that.
Yes.
I don't want that. I want a system in which all of this is going to be gone. And, we can see the ravages of the environmental destruction, but a system that has destroyed whole continents of human beings, that has committed genocide and wiped out millions and billions of people, or enslaved them, crushed them, destroyed their dreams, their resources, and their ability to have a future for themselves, of course will destroy the environment. It doesn't care about the Arctic glacier. It doesn't care about a whale or, any other animal or something going extinct. It doesn't care about the hurricanes and all of that, because it is about the profit motive and for the benefit of white power. So, I just think that there is a future that we can all be part of, and we acknowledge the African People's Socialist Party for giving us that, for opening this up, for giving us a way to join humanity, to end our self-imposed isolation from the rest of the people on the planet Earth, to be part of humanity, to reconnect with our own humanity for the first time, and to be able to join in a struggle that is going to transform this globe and solve all the problems that it is confronted with. When we see Africa free, when we see this land returned to the indigenous people, and we see all the people on the planet Earth with a return to their resources, their land, and their future, that is the future that I want to be part of, and I believe that you do too. So I just want to end by saying our slogan from the campaign, Unity Through
Reparations!
Uhuru!
Uhuru!
the chair of the Committee for Justice for the 3 Drowned Black Girls, the People's District 6 City Councilwoman of St. Petersburg, Florida, chair of Communities United for Reparations and Economic Development, or CURED, and member of the African People's Socialist Party, Akilé Anai.
All right.
So I really want to appreciate that introduction and also just salute the amazing work of the Days of Solidarity with African People tour. This has been an amazing experience. I want to salute first and foremost my leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and the African People's Socialist Party. Also really want to commend Aisha Fields, the International Director of the All African People's Development Empowerment Project, for not only having this beautiful convention earlier this weekend, but, just for the amazing work that is being done on the grounds here in Huntsville, Alabama. So we want to salute Dr. Aisha, APDEP, and even Zenzele Consignment for being able to have this event in this space. I want to salute Chairwoman of the African Solidarity Committee, Penny Hess, for that brilliant presentation, and also Chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and my running mate, Jesse Nevel. So I really want to salute Uhuru for all the amazing organizing and getting this room packed here this evening for this event. I just really appreciate it, and I'm very excited to be speaking. This is my first time in Huntsville, Alabama itself, and but I live in Florida. I'm from Florida, St. Petersburg, and all of this is they categorize this as the South. It is the South, and there is this understanding that the South is this real horrible place, because of the fact that, this is where, I guess this is where it all started, the enslavement of African people, and that's what's most prominent in people's minds when they think about the South, at least, for Africans, and even white people, understanding the role, that the South played in the enslavement of African people. This was the hub. And, to even be able to stand here and say Uhuru, and to have the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, in Huntsville, Alabama, is like, what?
Yes.
Like reparations to African people, but this is, and it was also part of Chairman's understanding when he founded the African People's Solidarity Committee. It was that, one, the South is not particularly special when it comes to the oppression of African people.
Exactly.
The South is not special.
Exactly.
Huntsville, Alabama is not special. Florida is not special. And all the places, Mississippi is not special to the oppression of African people. White power exists all around the world. It exists all around the world. It exists in Africa. It exists in the Caribbean. It exists throughout this country. It exists in the North. All the places, the progressive the part of this so-called illegitimate country. And, the North is supposed to be, the beacon of, progression. And like we just said, the New York stock market, Wall Street, is built on the bones of African people.
Yes.
That is the legacy of white power. And so when we even talk about the South, it's not some special place when it comes to the oppression of African people. And, with that understanding, we say that white people, it's possible to join the side of humanity.
Yes.
It's possible to adopt a profound theory like African internationalism as your own.
Yes.
And it's possible to adopt that theory and to unite with the the role of white people to organize for reparations. It's possible to adopt that line even in Huntsville, Alabama.
Yes.
Because it's actually possible everywhere it is that white people are. And that's something that the chairman always understood. And that's something that the APSC and, USM understands, is that white people, everywhere around the world, there's a sector of the white population that is uniting with the call for reparations to African people under the leadership of the African working class.
Yes.
That is something that is known, not just here in this country, but around the world. And when we're talking about, because we can go on and on and on about, the horrors of the South. One, this is the birth, this is the enslavement of African people here. And then, we have the lynchings, the burnings. We have, Birmingham, Alabama in the 50s where, 4 African girls are killed. And then But then you fast forward to 2016 in Florida, and you have the murder of Dominique Battle, Anai Miller, and Ashanti Butler by the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department. And you also have 9 Africans shot up in, Charlotte, by this guy, Dylan Roof, shoots up a church. I mean, so you have that history, and then you have the present day, and it's no different. We can go on and on about the atrocities committed here in the South. But, you look around the world at the atrocities that have been committed against African and colonized people, historically and today. I mean, we want to go so much as, so far as let's, go to France and see what France, I'm learning about the struggle of this judge, this white judge, who is, sexually assaulting white girls, 16-year-old girls here, and then there's an uproar, and then there's even, the white community coming out, white women coming out and defending this judge. Mm-hmm. But then you go to France, and you see that they lowered the age of consent to 13 years old, so that, old white men can pray, and it'll be legitimate, to be praying on 13-year-old white girls. But then you look, okay, so that's horrible, but then you look at France and the role that it plays. It's still raping and looting Africa today. Yes, right. It's still raping and looting African people everywhere we are. It's going in and sending their French soldiers and their missionaries into the Congo, raping African women and children.
Every day.
Every single day. It exists all around the world. Everywhere that white power is, it has to be crushed. It has to be destroyed. Yes. And it's happening. And I mean, we talked about the crisis of imperialism, and Penny Hess talked about the crisis of imperialism. We see this thing imploding on itself every single day. We saw the election of this man named Donald Trump, and we see this hysteria. It's this, oh crap, well, France are lowering the age, and then we got some guy over here is a pedophile, and everybody is fighting for this pedophile, and all these crazy things are happening, and it just seems like, why is this all happening? What's going on? The world is going to nothing, but that is not the worldview of African internationalism. And that's not even the worldview of the African working class or the African Socialist Party, the revolution. That's not the worldview, because we have an understanding that this is the crisis of imperialism. This is how it acts. This is how it functions. And that we don't see it as, like we're afraid of it. We see this as an opportunity now more than ever. We have to organize. We have to organize, and we have to take advantage of this crisis. And, and deepen the struggle to win ultimately, to crush the system forever. And that's something that the African People's Solidarity Committee and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement for white people provides, because you don't have to look at the crisis of imperialism as your crisis. Yes. Mm-hmm. And that you can, as white people, like we said, can join the side of humanity, can save yourselves from this hellhole of opioids, of drinking yourself to death, of siding with your own ruling class, and then still experiencing oppression of your ruling class, and siding against the masses of people around the world who will win their freedom, who will win their freedom, who will take back their resources. And then you'll have to be confronted with that reality. You'll have to be staring down the barrel of a gun of an African coming back for their land and their resources. But that does not have to be your crisis. Yes. You do not have to be afraid of this reality. You don't have to see Trump and clutch your pearls and get nervous. Because when you adopt the theory of African nationalism, when you become a revolutionary, when you join the struggle for reparations to African people, the world, the vision becomes so much more clear. Yeah. Because being a revolutionary is an optimistic thing. Yes. You have to be an optimist to be a revolutionary. Right. You see a future. Yes. You see a future. You can't see a future in this system. Yes. It's built on death and destruction, and that's how it's going to end. Yes. Yes. There's nothing. You can't see a worldview a future because there is none. That's right. It's a dying system. Right. That's right. And it's continuously dying because the mass of the people around the world will no longer live under the boot of white power. That's right. Will no longer be colonized. Yes. We were talking about it earlier. Chairman was talking about, you have people, freedom fighters, that will strap bombs to their bodies and go into a public space to kill everybody in that space, and then they're called the terrorists because the people that are in Colorado flying drones over to their country and stealing their resources aren't the terrorists. It's the people that strap bombs to their bodies and defending the people of their land and defending their land. This is what the people are willing to do right now. Right now. This is what the people are willing to do right now. The people will stop at nothing for our freedom. We will not. That is clear. So, and you don't have to be afraid of that. You know, you can join that side. You can join the side of fighting, you know, for the freedom of African people, because that frees up the entire world. That frees up the entire world. And again, that's such a beautiful, beautiful thing to look at. Because while this crisis is happening, and it seems like flames are going up and all this kinds of stuff, we over at the African People's Socialist Party, we just chilling. Because, you know, we had this amazing APSP convention. And we see the growth of our movement. And we see the, you know, the expansion of our movement. I mean, it's an international organization. You know, we have members in Europe, on the continent of Africa, in the Caribbean, and, you know, everywhere throughout this country. It's expanding. I mean, we see these amazing projects, you know, economic development for African people, building and expanding in St. Louis, Missouri, where we have something like the Black Power Blueprint under the leadership of Deputy Chair Omali Yeshitela of the African People's Socialist Party, building these amazing institutions, you know, for economic development, for the right to African people to be self-determining. We talk about dual and contending power. You got to come to St. Louis, because the party is doing it right there, too, and building all of these amazing institutions. And then you go to someplace like St. Petersburg, Florida, and we say this with confidence, that white people can be won to the stance of reparations. In lily white St. Petersburg, Florida, we waged a campaign, Unity Through Reparations, that ignited the entire city and even this country. People's eyes were on this, you know, on this little city in St. Petersburg, Florida, because of this campaign, and were inspired. White people were inspired. White people were in Florida, in the South, were never supposed to have the chance to vote for reparations to African people, and they did. We had, you know, we had this march, a demonstration while they were rioting in Charlottesville, the white nationalists with their tiki torches. You know, in 2 days, we organized a march of over 200 white people marching through gentrified St. Petersburg, shouting unity through reparations to African people. Yes. So we know it's possible. We know it's possible. And so, again, while, you know, this crisis is deepening, the revolution is winning. It is winning. It is the brightest thing you can ever see, and you can come out of this hellhole, and you can join the side of humanity. You know, you can fight for reparations to African people under the leadership of the African working class. And again, I have to say, under the leadership of the African working class. Because the African working class has to lead our own struggle. Yes. We will lead our own struggle. We have been leading our own struggle. Chairman Omali Yeshitela laid that foundation for us 45 plus years ago. And you have a role in that under the leadership of the African working class. Yes. So I just want to extend this, you know, invitation. It's going to be made, you know, throughout this entire event, but to join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, to join the African People's Solidarity Committee, which is the only way out, the only future that white people have, is to join the side of the revolution. Otherwise, what you see in the system, if that's what you want to be tied to, just know that it's going down. It's going down. You see it before your very eyes, and that's why you can find yourself afraid, because you're tied to it. But when you no longer have ties to it, and you commit national suicide, and you say, to hell with my ruling class, I'm going to join, you know, the side of the oppressed, that's not your reality anymore. Right. The reality is the future and the victory of the African working class and the struggle for liberation of African people. Thank you all so much. Unity through
reparations.
Uhuru.
Thank you, Akilé. Let's give this powerful community leader another hand. Yes. Now, it is my honor to introduce our keynote speaker for the evening, the revolutionary leader without whose vision, theoretical worldview, and strategy to win the revolution in his lifetime, none of us would be here today. The founder and leader of the Uhuru Movement, who provides leadership for the entire world revolutionary struggle, the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, Omali Yeshitela.
Uhuru. First of all, I'd really like to express my appreciation to USM or APSC, where?
Huntsville.
Is that Huntsville? And
Huntsville.
Huntsville, okay. Because at Athens, Huntsville, okay, splendid.
Yes.
And I'm really glad to be here. I want to thank everybody who worked to make this happen. come at Sister Aisha Fields, who is leader of the APDEP, All African Peoples Development Empowerment Project, which is a powerful statement. The name of it is a powerful statement unto itself, who's pulled together a very strong international executive committee that's doing incredible work in Africa. Fighting Ebola, played an important role in Africa, in Houston, Texas, during the hurricane, and right now building community gardens and this institution that everybody has to support. Yes. So I want to thank Aisha Fields, and that was an incredible presentation that just came from Akilé, as I had a Ronald Reagan moment, from Sister Akilé. And what makes it outstanding, again, is that the work that we do in the party is reflected in this young woman who, think about it, 23 years old, 20 years old now, in a city that's population only 23% African, running a campaign for reparations to black people, and running with a white guy who is running for mayor, talking about unity through reparations. Yes. A 23% African population. That's an incredible kind of thing, and that's happening this year. Yes. So one of the reasons that we know that we're winning and that imperialism is on its deathbed, you think about this. You think about being in Alabama right now. 20-year-old woman, African woman, standing up before you, talking about reparations to African people, and that this is the way out for white people. Didn't say it's out for African people. This is the way out for white people. Having that discussion in Huntsville, Alabama. I mean, that's incredible. That's incredible. And of course, my dear comrade, Penny Hess, who is one of the most honest and principled revolutionary leaders I have ever met. And she has to be brave and bold. Like, she's been doing this for almost 40 years or so. 41 years. I didn't want to tell our age. For 41 years. And you think about that. For 41 years. We're having this discussion now about reparations and white solidarity. 41 years ago. This was not a common and ordinary discussion. This was completely uphill. This was a place where we were lunatic friends for even having this discussion. This, when we first came out with this position and organized this, the most radical so-called white communist organization said it'll never work because white people won't work against their own interests, as if working under the leadership of African people is against the interests of white people. What kind of statement is that to come from a communist who's talking about transforming the world? Or we had some of them saying that the African People's Solidarity Committee was wrong because it was white women, white lesbians, working under black male leadership. There was some message there, I'm sure. But there was some message there. But the point is that this was 41 years ago when this process began. And this was a part of the thing that has brought us here today, and this courage that this woman had. And she's been organized in some of those incredibly difficult places. She's been chased by white people, attacked by white men in pickup trucks. Y'all know who I'm talking about. And I just want to really express my appreciation to that that heroic work that she's done. And say, this is the kind of movement that we are. That we're not just an organization of ideas. Because if you have a good idea and you can't implement it, it's useless. If you have some incredible ideology and you've met people with extraordinary ideologies, but you can't put it to work in the real world, then it's useless. What difference does it make that you got a wonderful idea if it's not something that can be implemented in the world? Because people are not interested in ideas. People want to change their conditions in the world. And so that's what the kind of movement that we have. The other thing I want to be clear about is that it's difficult sometimes to have these discussions because for the longest time that we've been in this country and in much of the world, white people have been subjects of history. And Africans and others have been objects of history. And you've written the books and defined who everybody was, etc. And I couldn't say anything about it. I would say something about it at the risk of my life. I couldn't even look at you. I had to learn a certain physical, my posture changed physically. I had to walk with my head and eyes down and things like that. And so you had no contest. Your opinion of yourself was the only thing that carried the day.
Yeah.
I love myself. I think I'm grand. I sit in the movies and hold my hand, right? So it was your opinion of yourself that prevailed.
Yeah.
But we have, and so that's part of what makes this movement, this discussion, sometimes uncomfortable and difficult. Because, believe it or not, the slave did not have the same opinion of the slave master
How about that?
that the slave master had of himself.
How about that, Chairman?
The slave might not have said anything about it in public. He murmured under his breath, talked about it in the quarters and what have you, but had an entirely different opinion. And that opinion is part of what you're seeing expressed today. That peoples of the world are talking back now, and it's uncomfortable because white people have never heard themselves defined in this fashion. Because have been able to define yourselves as this wonderful gift of God to humanity. And that is a reality in many different ways. And so sometimes that complicates the discussion. So, and part of what it does too, is it gives a very subjective character often to what is just reality. We talk in history and people are getting upset about it because it's not the same history that you want to believe in.
Yes.
But it's real.
Yes.
And so we have this subjective thing. And so people stomp their feet and then storm out of the room and what have you. Why would you say something like that? Because it's true.
That's right. That's right.
As my wife often tells, because I can. And so this affects the discussion that we want to have. And so I wanted to say that. And the other thing I want to say is that what we've heard up to now is not just a simply opportunity to chronicle all the bad things that white people have done to peoples of the world. Y'all have done some shit. I'm saying y'all have done some horrible stuff to the people. But it's not about just chronicling bad things. It's about coming up with a scientific explanation of why the world is like it is so that we can find a way to get the hell out of it.
Yes.
And if our response is going to be a subjective response because somebody just said what is true, and you don't like hearing that, then we can never find our way out of this.
Yes.
And that's why we oppose to this whole thing about struggling against racism. I'm fighting against racism. Well, how do you know when you won?
Right.
Nobody participates except us. We're supposed to fight in this struggle that you can't even say when you won. And it's not like somebody's going to come out with a white flag and say we surrender, sign a peace treaty or something like that. It's this racism. It's the ideas in the heads of people. And it places white people in this very center of the universe. And so somehow I'm struggling with you because of what you think about me.
Yes.
And that doesn't change anything in the world. And so we try to add some science to it. And I want to just start, if I may, I'll try to be expeditious with this, because we have to slay some dragons. And the first thing I think is really important for us to understand is that when most of the peoples of the world met what are now called white people or Europeans, you were poor, diseased, and had no freedom.
Yes, it's true.
Lived during a period known in European history as feudalism. Feudalism that lasted for nearly 1,000 years. And that where it was the next closest thing to slavery in the sense that the peasants and the serfs didn't own anything. They worked on land that was owned by the nobility and the so-called lords, which is where the concept of landlords come from today. They lived on the lands owned by the lords. And they worked and kept only a portion of what it was they produced on that land, and the landlords confiscated the rest of it. That's where the myth of Robin Hood comes from, right? Robin Hood and his band of merry men who would live in, Sherwood Forest, and come out and take money from the rich and give it to the poor, fight the tax collectors and stuff like that. White people lived under this kind of existence. Was no every man's home is his castle. No, the castle belonged to the nobility.
Yes.
Wasn't every man's. White people didn't own castles, didn't own homes, etc. It was something else that happened in history that made that possible. And I want to talk a little bit about that. But first, what's really important for us to understand, because we have to slay a lot of dragons, because we've been told, and this is how Europe has taught history, is that somehow Europe came out and rescued the rest of the world. This surplus of civilization and Christianity, that they had to just go out and share it with everybody else. And Rudyard Kipling, you know, the famous imperialist poet, is the one who coined the term the white man's burden. So we don't necessarily want to do it, but it's our burden because we've got Christianity and we've got this surplus of civilization. All the uncivilized and heathen people around the world, we have to go out and share it with them. And this is the explanation that's been given. But think about this. Just the years of 1347 and to 1351, 4 short years, half the white people on the planet Earth died. 4 short years, at least half the people, white people on Earth died of plague that swept Europe. Killed human beings, killed animals, cows, dogs, etc. It disrupted the entire European society. And it even gave Christianity a different look, because at some point the Christians saw that they were being punished by God for crimes they have committed. They didn't say which ones they were. And so you'd have hordes of white people literally marching through this territory that's now defined as Europe, engaging in self-flagellation, beating themselves, whips, beating themselves. These are a sect of Christianity that did this. It came from the plague. And assuming that they had been visiting by being punished by God. And the Pope, you know the Pope, the one who presides over this enterprise that would make Tom Moore blush. The Pope even assumed that he didn't want to really meet God for real, right? And so he left the Vatican. He really left the Vatican to escape the possibility of the plague getting him. The plague was really profound. Now, in 4 short years, this happened. This wasn't the entirety of the plague, the duration of the plague. The plague actually lasts for more than 100 years in different stages and with different intensity. But in 4 short years, half the people died. So you know that there could be no viable economy if half the people die in 4 years. Carpenters died, doctors died, builders died, herdspersons died, etc. 4 years. And this was an impoverished, disease-ridden Europe. And for the next 100 years, that plague and others impacted Europe in a very serious way. And then, so what happened? How does Europe rescue itself from this condition? And what it does, and what you must understand also, is there was no such thing as Europe. The white man didn't exist. Europe didn't exist. This is a relatively recent invention. Up to then, the people in this territory known as this place were warring tribes, always confronting each other. Other peoples around the world, if they could help it, they would not come through there with these warring tribes. People say you could smell Europe from hundreds of miles away. And so you've got this situation here of a severe desperation. And you have a situation where people identified and defined themselves in this territory primarily in relationship to each other. So you had the Normans, you had the Goths, you had the Celts, you had all these other forces who defined themselves primarily in relationship to each other. And what gave birth to the white man and to Europe was slavery, and colonialism. When Europe stepped out of Europe and began to go out and capture African people, when it began to take territories that were controlled by other folk, in order to get riches and wealthness. When this thing happened, then Europeans, though initially going to war with each other and still going to war with each other from time to time over this bounty, began to define themselves primarily in relationship to the rest of us. This is the origin of the white man. This is the origin of Europe as a nation. I said not France or Germany, Europe as a nation, where you had this group of people with a sense of sameness. And this sense of sameness was acquired as in opposition to Africans and other peoples around the world, and they were all connected to a common economy of looting and slavery. So this is the origin of the world economy. Karl Marx called it primitive accumulation of capital, because you have to ask the question, where the hell did capitalism come from? Is it true that was George Bush correct? Or all those people said God brought it and gave it to all the white people? Is Santa Claus real? Is there really a place where it's too cold for human beings to work? And so there's this little fat white guy who has these little short people working for him in magical circumstances where they just load up all this loot and take it to everybody who is good. That sounds like imperialism to me. It came from somewhere, but they can't define where it comes from. Yes. They can't tell you where it came from in Huntsville. They can't tell you where it came from anyplace else. But I know where it came from.
Yes.
And people in China, and people throughout India, and people throughout Africa, and the Americas, we know where the hell it came from. Chairman. Right? It came from us. And so whole peoples ceased to exist. Whole peoples were destroyed in the process of capturing all these resources. And the looting that went on in South, what they could now call South America, of the indigenous people there, who were locked in mines, sometimes in water up to their chest, bringing out gold and silver that went into Europe. In fact, the economy of Spain was almost wrecked at one time because of that. It was based on silver, and the amount of silver they were bringing out of Peru that went into the economy almost wrecked the economy. By 1500, Portugal alone, little tiny backwoods Portugal, had brought something like 700 tons of gold out of Africa. This is the thing that began to change what we now know as Europe, and brought tremendous amounts of resources there. But it didn't just bring resources there. The resources was coming from somewhere. It was robbing and looting other peoples and destroying their economies and destroying their lives and what have you. And what we must also understand is that society is comprised of an economic base and also a superstructure. Economic base, how people go about, societies go about accumulating, acquiring what it is that's needed to produce life, reproduce life, feed, clothe, and house ourselves. And the superstructure, these are the ideas. These are the legal institutions and what have you. Even the culture that flows from this economic base. From this economic base. You wonder why they call this thing racism? Because it's something that offers an explanation that's rooted, tethered to, if you will, a base of slavery and looting. It's not an accident. There's no magic. It's not some hormonal problem that white people got. There are explanations, and the world is explained by this superstructure that rests on looting the rest of the world and slavery to this group of people who have now been so defined as white. As white. And so that's the world that we're struggling with. You want to understand today, you understand Donald Trump, you want to understand Barack Hussein Obama, you understand why drones are being used to kill people all around the world? Because the world economy, the configuration, the economic and political configuration of the planet Earth is based on this looting expedition that created the capitalist system and all of the structures that went into place to reinforce and maintain it. That's where it came from. And you think about this. This place, this cold, barren rock, that's still living in semi-feudal and playing on semi-feudal consciousness with a so-called queen, right? at one time, England controlled 25% of the world's population and 25% of the territory of the planet Earth. This, I'm talking about the old tea-sipping genteel British. The ones who are complaining about terrorism this. Now I'm talking about the one who in 1841 and 42 picked the war with China because they wanted to trade opium that it was getting from someplace else with China for tea. China said, we'll keep the tea, keep the opium, we don't want to do this, and so they fought a war with China and turned China into a nation of junkies. They forced China to take opium. The French controlled Vietnam for 100 years or so, with the biggest looting, the biggest colonial product coming out of Vietnam, opium, with more than 3,000 legal opium dens in France. This is changing the world. And what you see is the rest of the world being pushed into despair and the worst, most desperate kinds of situations, and all this loot and resources coming to what is now called Europe. And then, of course, the surplus population of Europe sent out to colonize and bring more loot to Europe. And they get to places, they sent to Australia as a debtor's prison, what they call Australia. And they warned those black people there, murdered those black people there in the most horrendous way, just murdered.
Yes.
And then, of course, here, come here, there's a passage that you can read in, I think it's called Imperialism, The Last Stages. That's what it's called of capitalism, that by a guy named V.I. Lenin. And he talks about Cecil Rhodes. You know, Cecil Rhodes was this white guy who was from England. And he said, I was walking through London. And the people were marching and demanding bread, bread, bread. The people were rising up hungry in England. And he said, it was then that I recognized that if England is going to be saved, it's going to have to become imperialist. If you're going to have to get rid of the surplus population, and we're going to have to bring this looting thing. Cecil Rhodes is the one who went into southern Africa, right? He is the one who created this place called Rhodesia, that you've been reading about today, that's called Zimbabwe, where white people were brought there and told that if you kill the people and take the land, you can have X amount of land. And they did. They brought in Maxim machine guns on a single afternoon, killed more than 5,000 Africans, and rewarded with land. Right there in this place that's called Zimbabwe today. This is the part of the process, but the most incredible, most significant part of the process was the thing that created, for the first time in history, a single world economy. And this single world economy came about through trading in black people, black bodies. That's used to refer to it as the triangle of trade. You've heard of that, haven't you? And this was a precondition for the rise of capitalism as a world social system. Capitalism was not something that was born just in Manchester, England. It was born as a world system. And the rise of capitalism is where you see the advent of white power in the whole world. And this is a point that I really want to make, is because now you had people who were peasants, who were stuck on the land, who owned nothing. Karl Marx called the advent of capitalism progressive. He said this is progress in human history, because one of the reasons he called it progress is because it meant the end of feudalism in Europe. So you don't have white people just tied to the land, working for the landlord. And that was progress. But where the hell did the white people go? They came here and created havoc, to the point that we have concentration camps in this country today that they recognize as Indian reservations. What happened to them? And so this is progress. It ain't progress to the people who are living on Big Mountain in Arizona, to Diné and Navajo people.
Right.
It's not progress to the people who've been disappeared throughout the Americas, who don't even exist anymore. You got a place called Haiti. There used to be indigenous people there. They're not there anymore. You can't say that's progress, you see? And people say to us all the time that capitalism saw the most productive, is the most productive system in the world. You can't have more productivity than capitalism. You've heard that.
Yeah.
Yes, you've heard it.
Yeah.
And because they compare it with Russia or China. I don't know anything about Russia or China to that much, but I do know this, that it's a hell of a statement to make to the peoples of the world to say that a handful of people, white people, control the entire world and kick everybody else out of the productive process. So you're saying that we couldn't have made any progress if the indigenous people were still alive, if they weren't in concentration camps, if we hadn't murdered everybody, if Africa today were not under white domination. You're trying to say that there couldn't have been any productivity. You're saying the only way human progress and productivity could have occurred is through this act of violence and terror that was imposed on us, brigadiers, by white people.
Yes.
Oh shit.
That's right, Chairman.
Ridiculous and asinine.
Yes, Chairman. Yes,
And white people know it's ridiculous too, because as much as they say that stuff, you have to look in the mirror. You know you ain't all that. And so, you know, this is the world that we've inherited.
Yes.
And what's happening is that this arrangement has never been one that accepted by the majority of the people in the world. We don't want this. Nobody's ever wanted this arrangement.
Yes.
In order for it to have maintained it, it took extreme violence all across the planet Earth to maintain this relationship. They put puppets in place all around the world. They've been doing this forever, putting puppets in place to carry out their missions for them in our name. You see, but nobody's liked it, and so they murdered, they lynched. I don't have to tell you about lynching in Alabama. They lynch sometimes. In situations, it's really incredible. I mean, being in Alabama is incredible. During the time of Tom Moore.
Roy Moore.
What's his name? Roy Moore. Roy Moore. And, you know, because I remember, you know, so many black people, black men have died
Yes.
protecting the purity of white womanhood.
Yes.
And sometimes they died because of judges.
Yes.
Right.
And sometimes just ordinary white people protecting the purity of white womanhood.
Yes.
And here this guy is raping 14-year-old girls, molesting them, and there's more that have not surfaced yet.
Yeah.
He says they're all lying. Well, hell, why didn't you believe the other brother when they said they were lying? Why didn't you believe the black people who you lynched and murdered who said they were lying?
Yes.
Or have they just become liars today?
Yes.
And I don't want to be, I don't want to be callous about this question. But I'm serious as a heart attack. I'm serious about whining white women who know what white men have done in terms of raping black women historically throughout the South and right here in Alabama.
Yes.
And you need to have that discussion.
Yes.
You just can't tell me, get rid of. I saw an editorial in today's Huntsville Times about their opinion. They got to be decent and get rid of Roy. What's his name? Roy Moore. Right? Be decent and fess up.
Yep.
Yes.
Fess up about the whole history.
Yes.
That's why we say unity through reparations.
Yes.
Reparations.
Yes, Chairman.
Because reparations requires a confession.
Yes.
And you just can't go along with business as usual because somehow the system is affecting you in an unpleasant way.
Yes.
Because the entire system is one that rests upon the enslavement and oppression of everybody else on the planet Earth.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
white women were raped and molested by white men even during slavery.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can see it now in the slave quarters. People getting together and crying, tears, because Miss Susie just got raped by Mr. Bubba. You understand? Please. No, you got to fix this stuff, and you ain't going to fix it by telling me that I'm finding decency by somehow condemning Roy Moore.
Yep.
We got to condemn this relationship. We got to condemn this system. Because all the Roy Moores of Alabama practiced what he was doing with black women.
Yes.
That's where the whole concept, somebody in this room knows what I'm talking about when I talk about Alabama red bone. Don't you know what I'm talking about? Where it come from.
Yes.
You understand?
Yes.
So this is the relationship. These are the kinds of crazy relationships that's been imposed on us, and I don't want them anymore. I'm not going to act like somehow we're going to solve the problem by saying fighting against racism. It's a social system that was born in slavery and genocide.
Yes.
It has no redeeming value,
Yes.
no redeeming qualities at all.
Yes.
There's nothing good about it. And that's what we're going to have the ability to say.
Yeah.
And it's got the ones who he has pulled into place that function as guardians of the system. Let's say ordinary white people. You know, which your ability to do this proves that everything you said about how smart you are is just a lie. You surround these thugs and criminals and murderers, the ruling class, and they play this game with you because they white and you white. And so you united with them murdering and creating mayhem all around the world. And that's why people are strapping on stuff, bombs, and walking into supermarkets, because they can't distinguish you from the ruling class.
Yes.
They want the ruling class, but you standing between them and the ruling class with your white self. With your white self. So we have to do better than that.
Yep.
That's why, you know what? The first national demonstration that was held against Barack Hussein Obama, when he came to the White House, when I organized it. The African People's Socialist Party organized it. We organized the Black is Back Coalition, and the first thing we did when we got on was march on the White House when Barack Obama was there. That was ours. We can't say. Some people say he black. We can't do. Damn if we can't do it.
Right.
He's making war against the peoples of the world, and people think that I got something to do with this? Hell no.
That's right.
We're going to expose this guy, and we're going to provide leadership to our people by attacking this guy. Because he's white power in a black face.
Yes.
That ain't good enough, and you're going to have the courage to stand up to this white lie yourself.
Yes.
Because my responsibility is to kick the ass of the white ruling class. That's my responsibility. So, I appreciate having this discussion. It's a really important kind of discussion. And building this kind of movement and opening up this capacity for North Americans, the white people, to join the rest of humanity. Because I want to finally say that there are all kinds of contradictions in the world. There's no society, no thing within which contradictions do not exist. But the primary contradiction in this world is the contradiction between oppressed and oppressor nations. The oppressor nation and the oppressed. That's the fundamental contradiction that exists in the world. And among the oppressor nations, there are contradictions. White women are oppressed. Ask one more. Ask the Huntsville Times. They said white women are oppressed, messed over, beat up, etc. And in worse shape than that. You and I know what I'm talking about. The lack of confidence and all the horrible stuff the ways that you think about yourself due to how white power has defined everything. So white women are oppressed. White homosexuals are oppressed. White workers are exploited. That's among the oppressed. That's within the oppressor nation itself. That's the reality. But the same thing is true. You can find some of these contradictions among the oppressed nation. White African women oppressed by African men. African homosexuals oppressed. This happens, but the primary contradiction, the one around which all the others revolve, is this contradiction between oppressed and oppressor nations. That's the thing that we have to assault. Not to say that we don't mess with the other ones, but that's the primary contradiction. Because black men even raped black women, African women, during slavery. So we say, well, we can't fight the slave master because, no, she wouldn't have been available and accessible to him if it hadn't been for this arrangement, this slavery that made it possible.
Yes.
So I'm going to do something to him But I'm not going to be detracted from recognizing that the
Yes.
primary contradiction, we got to destroy this relationship
Yes.
that we have with
Yes.
white power.
Yes.
This whole relationship between oppressed and oppressor nations has to be destroyed.
Yes.
Our movement believes that.
Yes.
And finally, it's not a movement about charity, it's about self-determination.
Yes.
It's about winning the capacity. It's about fighting against a state power that's foreign and hostile, that works against the interests of Africans and everybody else in the world. But it's also about having fought against that state power, having to achieve state power of our own.
Yes.
Having to have the power of our own. Because if you ain't got power, you ain't got nothing. All this stuff about fighting against racism, if you make them like you today, tomorrow they might not.
Yes.
You understand? But if you got power, then you don't have to worry about whether somebody likes you or not. Because they can't do nothing to you. If they, in fact, power, as Henry Kissinger once said, is an aphrodisiac.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make somebody love you, get some power.
It's true.
You understand? They used to hate Chinese. Now China got nuclear weapons and all this other stuff and contending with white power all around the world. You don't hear those anti-Chinese jokes like that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Power is an aphrodisiac.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing I want to say is this, that black is not enough, being black.
Yeah.
Because Barack Hussein Obama was black.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care how many people might like Barack Hussein Obama, he's a traitor.
Yes.
And
Yes.
he's an agent of imperialism.
Yes.
He works against black people and
Yes.
every oppressed people
Yes.
around the world. Yes,
Yes.
he does.
Yes, he does.
And I know some sisters have some problem with that in particular. They think he's good looking. I don't get it, but what I don't, sister. But he has, and I know why Africans have such an affinity. Because we've been beat up and slandered and told how inarticulate and how stupid we are, etc. And then you got this smooth talking, slick fellow, who comes through and he winks at you. He don't say that he's going to hit you. And you can't blame Obama for not doing something. He never claimed he's going to do a damn thing for you.
Yeah.
He never said he's going to do anything for you. And he didn't. So he kept his word on that. But to see this guy stand up and seem to contend with all of these people eloquently and what have you, so we had this vicarious thrill of being redeemed because he could do that. But he was not working for us.
No.
Never was working
No.
for us.
No.
And that's important. So our organization recognizes that the leader of this movement, this revolution, is going to be the African working class.
Yes.
And that's something difficult for a lot of people to deal with because work and being a worker is something that has come into deep, powerful disgrace through slavery. The whole concept of being a worker. And there's no romance in that. The first thing an African wants to do is find a way to get out of the field, get out of that stuff, because that's this, and so this whole concept of workers is difficult. That's why even in this country today, you don't hear them talking about what they're going to do with the working class. They talk about the what? Middle class. And so, because nobody wants to be associated with the concept of workers because that's this connotation, this association with slavery. But the truth of the matter is, workers create all value. The workers create all value. Professors don't create value. Stockbrokers don't create. Bankers don't create values. Workers create values. Human beings putting hands to nature and transforming it to serve us. That's where all the value comes from. And so that's why we talk about the working class. And the problem, however, is in the world that's been created under white power, capitalism, you have this incredible contradiction where you have what is a socialized production, right? People have to come together to produce everything, even if they don't live in the same country. People collectively, socially produce everything that there is. When you go to the shop and purchase something, you come to Zenzele, it's been produced socially. On the one hand, so you have socialized production, but then you have private ownership of the means of producing. Somebody who doesn't produce a damn thing privately owns the ability to produce everything. Mm-hmm. And this is a profound contradiction. Mm-hmm. And that's who controls the world. Those who own it, own the means of production, but don't produce anything. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who make the decision on what happens to the rest of us. And they need you to participate in this phony process that they call elections, because that validates them. It validates them. Elections were created for the purpose of having nonviolent contests between contending sectors of the ruling class. It was not made to make you free. Oh, I just got a signal. It was to make sure that you don't get free, right? And so, so this is what we're looking at, and this is where you see this crisis that's happening, because you see the ruling class is split. That's why you had something like 25 people who were trying to run for president, because you got all these different sectors of the ruling class who putting their money on this guy, this guy, this guy to carry out their own will. When you vote for him, what you've done is given this guy a mandate to carry out some imperialist policy in your name.
Yes.
You see, that's what's happening.
Yes.
So I want to just express my appreciation again to AP, to All African People's Development Empowerment Project for allowing us to be here for this wonderful meeting that's been conducted under the leadership of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. For you who've come out and patiently listened to me soapbox without throwing a single thing at me, and for this movement that's growing every day, and it is growing every day, where we are challenging the status quo and even how people perceive the status quo.
Yes.
So just want to thank you again and say unity
Through reparations.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. For this part.
I first want to salute the visionary leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Deputy Chair Ona Zane Yeshitela, and the entire African People's Socialist Party, who have won us in the Uhuru Solidarity Movement to see our future in the inevitable success of the African Liberation Movement and freedom for all humanity in our lifetime. I also want to salute our incredible speakers, Akilé Anai and Penny Hess. We've heard a really powerful testimony about the most pressing question for white people in these serious times, which is how to rectify our relationship to African people as their oppressors. This event has made so clear anti-racism is not the answer. Holding up a Black Matter sign is not the answer. Trying to take on Black culture is also not the answer. Reparations is the answer.
Yes. Yes.
The only way to participate in a future where we're not the oppressors. When we look at a world and we see the social system in severe crisis, it can seem like everything is hopeless. But then we look at the Uhuru movement is building, and all we can see is a bright and positive future for African people, and that we can be a part of that. The way we do that is through reparations. Reparations is not something the Uhuru movement is planning to do in the future. Reparation, it's happening now, and returning the resources hoarded in the white world to African people to reclaim their own communities. The party is building dual and contending economic power in the hands of the African working class, which is on the rise in St. Louis. Black Star Industries is building an amazing foundation of a liberated African economy in St. Louis, what will be a vibrant, prosperous life for African people. It's building in St. Louis what we've already done in Oakland, Philadelphia, and St. Petersburg, Florida. Originally, Africans came to St. Louis during the Reconstruction period, built a thriving economic cultural hub for themselves, and the U.S. counterinsurgency has destroyed that. So, wait. What was left was poverty, abandoned buildings, and rising police containment. Today, there are LRA, Land Reutilization Authority, properties where the city sells some of these buildings for $1,000. but the process is so complicated that it's not accessible to the African working class. So it's really a form of gentrification. But under Deputy Chair Omali Yeshitela and the 45-year experience of the party in building institutions, she led the way, and Black Star Industries was able to secure properties. This is from a 45-year track record of building self-reliant institutions. The goal of Black Star Industries is to create commerce by and between African people. This is not charity. Black Star Industries is about building organization and the ability of African people to be self-governing. The African People's Socialist Party knows that self-determination means having economic self-reliance. In a stage in history where gentrification is annihilating African communities all over the world, we see gentrification happening right here in Huntsville.
Yep, sure do.
Black Star Industries puts power in the hands of the African community to fight back against this force destroying their communities. We can see it for our own eyes with these pictures of the properties that the party has acquired in St. Louis, as well as the Black Star Industries institutions that have been built in various other parts of the world. Black Power 96 is a community radio station in the hands of the African working class community. It puts out stories and talent from the African community where African people can speak in their own voice, tell their own stories, and serving their own struggle for self-determination and power over their own lives. And similarly, the Burning Spear newspaper is another form of African working class controlled media that puts out their own narrative and their own struggle and serves as dual and contending power against white nationalist media. We also have some for sale here. Okay. There's also Uhuru Foods and Pies, which is about putting the means to grow, produce, and distribute fresh food into the hands of African people. This includes the goals to control their own land, farms, trucking, baking, cooking, and distribution of food. Uhuru Furniture. The two locations contend with the gentrification of North Philadelphia and Oakland, two historically African communities, by building an institution of economic development in the hands of African people. Thousands of people of all nationalities and walks of life shop, donate, and volunteer at Uhuru Furniture. And the resources generated from the furniture stores goes back to fund the book fairs, health fairs, and One Africa, One Nation flea markets that generate commerce for and between African people and provide programs for education, health, sustainable economic development, and self-determination by and for the African community. Here are the Uhuru houses in Oakland and St. Pete. These aren't just crucial organizing spaces. They also provide an accessible, affordable space for the community to rent for events like weddings, birthdays, banquet shows, rallies, you name it. And here is, and we also have an Uhuru house in St. Louis. I haven't seen the picture yet, so yeah, you can change it. Yeah.
All right.
The party has been in St. Louis for 3 years. After the killing of Mike Brown, and since then, it's been the home of their mass organization, International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. Now the party is making this historic move to the Midwest, bringing all these cultural and economic hubs right into the heart of the impoverished African community. Across the street from the Uhuru House are 2 buildings that will need to be demolished. They've collapsed in on themselves. All of it will be one open space for an outdoor community venue space and a lot for the One Africa, One Nation marketplace. This is going to be the new home of Uhuru Jiko Kitchen, a community commercial kitchen to be rented for very affordable prices by aspiring Black entrepreneurs. It will also be the home of Uhuru Foods and Pies and the future African Independence Workforce Program, an outdoor cafe and event venue. This kitchen will also be a training kitchen to train formerly incarcerated Africans who are victims of colonial prisons. This is Black Star Industries on the move. They are developing and forging communities. They want to go to Chicago and Detroit, where communities have been decimated. This is a tremendous victory for the African working class.
Yes.
Uhuru.
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 Uhuru, everybody. I just want to thank everyone for being here. And my name is Jesse Nevel. I'm the chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And also a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee that I have the honor to work under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party and Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And first of all, I just want to salute Carrie.
Yay!
Carrie has done an amazing job for years building here in Huntsville.
Yes, she has.
And is our revolutionary yoga teacher.
Yes.
Yes. Doing fundraisers and building house events and just all kinds of incredible work building white solidarity with Black Power here in Alabama, which we talked about how significant that is.
Yes.
And I also want to salute Chairwoman Penny Hess, the African People's Solidarity Committee, who for 41 years has been carrying out the mission laid forward by the African People's Socialist Party, by the chairman, to win other white people to the question of reparations to African people, and is a role model for all of us in this generation to be able to take up this mission as our own and as our own future to complete this revolutionary process. And I also want to appreciate Dr. Aisha Fields and just say that when I was 19 years old, I went to an event in Sarasota, and this is the first time I met the Uhuru Movement. I saw Chairwoman Penny Hess, and I saw Dr. Aisha Fields speak. And I remember something that day that I never forgot, that Dr. Aisha Fields said that African people are not suffering from a lack of charity. African people are suffering from a lack of their control over their own resources, from a lack of self-determination. And being here at this amazing, amazing APDEP conference over the last 2 days has just made that so clear, that the brilliance, the genius of African people that has had a chokehold put on it by white power, by imperialism, that if African people had control of their resources, there would not be a single starving African person on the planet Earth.
Yes, that's right.
There might not be a single starving person anywhere.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And I also want to salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And the brilliance of African internationalism and the future that Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party has made possible for the entire planet, and for the science of understanding that despite all the horrific things that we've done as white people, that white people are still human beings that can be one to what that means to join the rest of humanity. And that, as the chairman said, that when given the opportunity to be the best that human beings can be, that we will rise to the occasion. And another thing, I just wasn't going to say all this, but these presentations tonight from Akilé Anai, just an incredible presentation, as always, from the chair of Communities United for Reparations and Economic Development, and everything that has been said tonight just inspired a lot of thought. So I just want to say a few things real quick before we continue on. One is that when we say that we're talking about reparations and not charity, sometimes you hear this saying that, like, you know, if you teach a man to fish, if you give a man to fish, he'll eat for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime, or something like that. But African people know how to fish. It's not, this convention over the last 2 days has shown the skills, the genius, the brilliance is there. It's we've been stealing all their fish and polluting their waters, and then calling them pirates when they try to take it back. That's the real issue. So that's not even that whole kind of thing that you hear, teach a man to fish. More like stop stealing the fish and give back all the fish and the waters to African people as reparations. That's what we're talking about. And in the process of doing that, white people, you know, like the chairman said, we've done some horrible shit to the planet Earth, to the peoples of the planet Earth. We also did something really horrible to ourselves. We isolated ourselves from the whole human race. What are white people? We isolated ourselves. We were isolated before in poverty, in feudalism, and then we attacked the whole planet. Instead of coming like, hey, we're looking for nutmeg or whatever we claim to look. Can we have some and can we share and maybe something? You know, we were like, no, we're going to kill you. We're going to steal it. This is beautiful. I'm going to kill it. I'm going to steal it. I'm going to rape it. That's what we did. And then we isolated ourselves in wealth, in stolen wealth from the rest of the planet. And like, when you go into a music store, there's a section called world music. Like that's a separate category from the rest of the music store. That's like a microcosm of our relationship to the planet.
It's so true.
We separated ourselves from the rest of humanity, and that's a miserable existence. In a very twisted way, in a happy Christmas carol, scary, fake way, gift wrapped in nonsense type of way. It's a miserable existence to be alone on a mountain of bones, which is where we placed ourselves through attacking and enslaving and murdering the vast majority of the people on the planet to create the basis for our existence. And we don't even have the ability to define it, to explain it, without Chairman Omali Yeshitela, without African internationalism, without the theory and worldview of the African working class. We come up with the most ridiculous explanations. Or we just kill ourselves. It sucks. So we commit suicide, or do drugs, or drink ourselves to death, and whatever else. But throughout this conference, there was an amazing panel on mental health, and Kobina, from the African People's Socialist Party, quoted Frantz Fanon, who said that the way for the colonized to be healed is to kill the colonizer. And I think we can add the way for the colonizer to be healed is to kill the colonizer. Kill the colonizer. And that doesn't necessarily mean kill yourself. Because national suicide means killing your whiteness. And all whiteness is our attachment to a white power social system that requires violence to survive. And it is going to die because African people are not going to take it anymore. They are going to be free. They are going to win their liberation. So this social system is going to die. And instead of dying with it, we can join in killing it and celebrate its death.
How about that? How about that?
And the beautiful thing is, this is not some anarchistic, nihilistic vision of destruction, of world destruction. This is just the process of the emergence of a new world. And the beautiful thing is the African People's Socialist Party is not even waiting to destroy this system to start building the new world. They're building it right now. We're in it. This store that is an example of African people taking back their resources and building an economic future for themselves and for the entire planet Earth. We are inside of it right now. And we can continue to be inside of it and to be a part of it in the future through reparations to African people. Through white solidarity with black power. That's what this is about. Last thing I want to say before we continue on with this is the chairman said something really important, that reparations is a confession. And I had the amazing honor and experience with Akilé of running for office under the leadership of the chairman and the brilliant strategy of the chairman in St. Petersburg, Florida, on a platform of unity through reparations. And I was running against a Jewish guy named Rick Kreisman, who's the current mayor. And I'm a Jewish guy named Jesse Nevel from St. Petersburg, Florida. So one day the chairman told me, this was before one of the debates, he said, here's what you need to say. What you need to ask is, if it was all right for Kreisman's family as Jews and my family as Jewish people to receive reparations for the crimes committed against the Jewish people in Europe in the 1930s and 40s, then why would anyone have a problem with black people receiving reparations? Is it because they're black? Why would it be proper for white people in Europe to receive reparations for something that, if you really look at it, is a pinch on the cheek compared to what white people have done to African people? And there wasn't even a word for genocide until white people got a taste of what we've been doing to the rest of the planet for hundreds of years. Why would we be okay with reparations to European Jews and then not support reparations to the black community? That makes absolutely no sense. And it's because reparations is the acknowledgement of a crime that's been committed. And everyone on the planet, and you can't go into a city in this country without bumping into a Holocaust museum. There were no Jews killed in St. Petersburg, Florida, but there's a Holocaust museum in St. Petersburg, Florida. But Alabama is about to open the first museum of lynching. The first museum devoted to documenting the horrors of lynching. That's the real Holocaust that happened on this land, this country, which itself was built on a Holocaust we carried out against the indigenous people. But there are no Holocaust museums for them. So reparations is a just demand reparations is a confession of an acknowledgement of a crime that's been committed.
Yes.
And beyond that, reparations is taking responsibility for righting the wrongs of the past.
Yes.
That's what reparations is.
Yes.
So, here we are, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. We are an international organization of white people working under the leadership of the party, building reparations to African people. And when you join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement in Huntsville, Alabama, you're joining white people like you all over the country, all over the world. We just had a member join in Finland. White people all over the world who want to participate in bringing down the social system and the emergence of a better world for all people. So tonight, we are calling on you to join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and to contribute towards these incredible programs that the Uhuru Movement is building. That is concrete reparations in action. So right now, you're going to be receiving a donor card, and the way that you can fill out that donor card, just to give a little brief instructions, you can become a sustaining member. A sustaining member means that you contribute monthly towards all these programs that we've looked at in this slideshow. You can update your membership if you're already a member. You can update to a higher level, and just make sure you make a note of that on the pledge card. You can become a general member. General membership is $25 a year or $10 for students. And you can also make a one-time donation of any amount. You can announce it. It can be anonymous. However you do it, please make sure you fill out the card so we have a record of it and so we can thank you for your contributions. Okay, so we have a goal tonight, and this is not the goal. So you know, right now. I mean, according to a social science quarterly published by the University of Connecticut, the United States owes $14.2 trillion to African people for unpaid labor alone. That doesn't include everything that we've done since. Okay? So $1 million is really nothing. But the reason we put that number there is because that is the amount of money that white people donated to Darren Wilson. If you go to the next slide. The murderer, the white cop who killed Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014. White people took GoFundMe had to shut down his account because the money kept pouring in to reward this white terrorist for the state-sanctioned lynching that he carried out in the murder of Mike Brown. So I assume we can do better than that. We can at least match these white nationalists who rewarded this cop $1 million to kill Mike Brown. So tonight, our goal is 1,000.
Okay.
Of 1 million. Of 14.2 trillion. Of the entire global economy. Built on the enslavement of African people. $1,000. So the first way that we can make this goal is if just one person became an Ella Baker sustainer level, which means that you donate $100 a month or $1,200 a year. We would actually surpass our goal instantly. One person decided to do that. And again, set up, comes out of your account every month, don't even notice, and every month, $100 to sustain the programs of Black Star Industries, the African People's Socialist Party. So is there anybody here tonight who would like to go ahead and get us started and become an Ella Baker level member? $100 a month, $1,200 a year of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And we also have people watching online, so I don't know if you can see the little chat things. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
There's also the Marcus Garvey level at $60 a month or $720 a year. So who wants to be a Garvey level sustainer?
Fannie Lou Hamer, who was an amazing African woman who built the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and was a key force in breaking from the white nationalist Democratic Party, which is a struggle that continues to this day. In honor of her, we have a membership level at $40 a month, $480 a year. Is there anybody here tonight that would like to become a Fannie Lou Hamer level member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement?
And of course, Malcolm X at $30 a month, which is $360 a year. Who would like to become a Malcolm X sustainer?
Just to put it in perspective, if you go back one slide, this is basically $1 a day. $1 a day towards the liberation of humanity.
Yeah.
If you think about what you spend $1 a day on.
Yeah.
And $1 a day in the African Revolution goes a long way.
Yeah.
The African working class reclaiming their resources,
Yeah.
who up to now have had to find ways to survive with even less than that.
Yes.
There are people on the planet Earth who live on less than $1 a day. So $1 a day, $360 a year, $30 a month. Anybody that would like to become Malcolm X Love. All right. So Katura Carey, I just want to mention that Katura Carey was one of the co-founders of the African People's Socialist Party. And to uphold the historical significance of this incredible revolutionary, we've named this level for Katura Carey $25 a month, $300 a year. Would anybody like to become a Katura Carey level member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement? Or if you're already a member, to upgrade to a Katura Carey level.
I got an online upgrade from $20 a month to $100 a month from Diane. Diane. I can't. Diane Batis.
All right.
All right.
That's the elevation. So $100 a month?
Yes.
Right on.
All right.
Awesome!
Wow. Great.
Oh, next is. And then we have the Queen Nzinga at $20 a month, which is $240 a year. Who would like to be a Queen Nzinga level sustainer?
I will.
All right.
Anybody else?
Anybody else?
All right. Huey P. Newton. All right, so yes. Oh, go ahead.
So I'm going to do the Huey P. Movement. I've been a sustainer at the Che Guevara, which we'll get to next slide. So I'm going to up mine to the 15, and I'm also going to give $75 tonight. So you can also do a membership. You can also do a one-time donation as well.
All right.
Got another sustainer upgrade from Casey Mackey. From Huey P. Newton to Queen Nzinga level.
All
All
right.
right.
Shout out to Casey Mackey, who just moved to St. Louis, Missouri,
Woo!
to participate in building the Black Power Blueprint.
Yes.
And salute to all of the leading members of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, including Comrade Jackson Hollingsworth, who coordinated the national tour to build the Days of Solidarity with
All
African
right.
people. So,
Uhuru.
Yep.
All right. So before we go on to Che, is there anybody else that would like to become a Huey P. Newton level member? That's $15 a month, $180 a year. And this is a picture from the final speech that Huey P. Newton gave before he was assassinated, which was in Oakland, California, at the Uhuru House. And of course, he's pictured here with Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And this was where Huey Newton famously said that although they had destroyed the Black Panther Party, there was the Uhuru Movement. Although they had destroyed the Black Panther newspaper, there was the Burning Spear newspaper. So they had done nothing by crushing one organization.
That's right.
Right on.
That's right.
So is there anybody who would like to become, like Carrie, a Huey Newton level sustainer member tonight? Okay.
Okay. And we have the Che Guevara $10 a month, which is $120 a year. Who would like to be a Che Guevara level sustainer?
I'll do it.
All right. Also upgrading from Steve Biko. So this is, yes, awesome. I'll let you.
This is the most popular level, by the way, the Che level, for obvious reasons. Is there anybody that would like to be like Che and also become, and be like Ryan, and be a Che level sustainer? $10 a month, $120 a year. Okay. So the last sustainer level that we have is named for the African revolutionary from occupied Tanzania, Steve Biko. And this is $5 a month, $60 a year. $5 a month. So it's like one Starbucks beverage, Frappuccino, a month. One less, which those are horrible anyway, so. That goes towards the liberation of African people and African people reclaiming control of their resources, including coffee. It was stolen African. So anybody that would like to become a Steve Biko level member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. All right, finally, general membership, $25 a year, or student fixed income, $10 a year. Is there anybody that would like to join at the basic general membership level of $25 a year? Or if you're a student, $10 a year. All right, and last but not least, is there anybody that would like to donate at any random amount at all? Any random amount? Can you raise your hand and let us know? Sure, go ahead. Oh, okay.
I forgot about y'all a little bit out here.
We got an upgrade from Raya from a Biko to Che sustainer, and $35 from Jackson, and $30 from KC, and $100 from me and Tina.
We also have a $75 pledge from Neil Kaufman, who couldn't be here tonight. We also have a $50 for Olivia Guger. I lost her name for a moment. Reparations payment tonight as well.
Uhuru.
We also have about 240 that we've collected from various people online. So I want to give a shout out to Bill Krause, Ross Grayson, Marissa Laufer, Valerie Bronte, Casey again, Kristen Fortham, and Diane Backus. So thank y'all very much for your reparations.
All right.
Uhuru. All right, well, I really want to appreciate everybody for contributing, and we are going to come back and announce how much we as a group raised tonight towards our goal, and I'm pretty sure we surpassed it, so already we have
All right.
in advance. Yes. But before we step away, I just want to let you know that please don't leave tonight without getting signed up. We have a computer, we can get you signed up. Your sustainership, it's very easy, and your upgrade or whatever, we can do that before you leave tonight. So please make sure you stop by at our table before you go, and we can get you signed up. And also, any contribution that you want to make, one-time donation, you can make that by card. If you have the pledge card, you can make a check out to Uhuru, UHURU, or you can donate cash. Any of those payment methods work. So, Carrie, anything else you want to say? Okay. Well, again, thank you all so much. Thank you to our amazing speakers and Chairman Omali Yeshitela for that absolutely amazing presentation that he gave earlier.
Yes.
And to all of our speakers, Akilé, Chairwoman Hess, and also to Dr. Aisha Fields, Muteba, and all of the incredible leaders of the African People's Socialist Party.
Uhuru.
So I'm just going to make a few announcements, and then after the announcements, we'll have an opportunity for Q&A. So thanks so much for everyone for participating in this powerful appeal. I really salute everyone who's taken the stance of material solidarity with Black Power. I'm excited to see the movement for reparations grow in Huntsville. Speaking of growth, I have a few announcements. So starting in January, I'm going to be coordinating a monthly yoga class called Yoga of Reparations, which is part of a Reparations Challenge campaign of USM. I'm also looking for folks to help do outreach for these classes, which would be a great way to promote health as well as consistently raise resources for Black Star Industries. We're actually going to do the class here at Zenzele on the second Wednesdays of every month, starting in January. So the first one will be January 10th at 6:30 here at the shop. So USM has weekly national events that are over the phone, as well as online that you can tune into from anywhere. And really, it takes weeks, sometimes months, depending on how much time you devote to study and to internalizing this worldview. It's not as simple as just reading a pamphlet and then going, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
It really takes time. It has taken me years, and I feel like I still have years of study to go to really internalize this. It's a worldview. It's big. So it does take time. So I highly recommend that you take advantage of the phone conferences, because you're going to take advantage of the level of experience of cadre, people who've been doing this and learning this for years and years longer than I. And so I can't recommend enough how important it is. So we have Saturday, there's new membership orientation at it's 1:30 Central Time. And it's an in-depth overview of USM's history and mission, led by Membership Chair Raya. So that's every Saturday. We also have Burning Spear Studies, and that's going to be at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, and that's led by National Secretary Connor Boss, which is live streamed from the USM Facebook page. So you should go to our National Uhuru Solidarity Movement page and like us there, but also we have a Huntsville page as well. And then on Sundays at noon, we have a mass meeting for the Reparations Challenge, which is, you bring your skill sets to this. So I teach yoga. That's what I can do for reparations. So I can bring people in and, it's a way for me to do my work, but also practice what I preach. So Tuesday, November the 21st at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 6 p.m. Central Time, we're going to tune into the second episode of the new Facebook Live series hosted by the Committee for Justice for 3 Drowned Black Girls. Akilé Anai will be the keynote speaker, presenting on the relationship of African and indigenous liberation. It will be streamed on the Facebook page Justice for the 3 Drowned Black Girls, 3DBG. The African People's Socialist Party's 7th Congress is going to be next summer at the historic Uhuru House in Oakland, California. It's an awesome occurrence. The highest body of the party, where membership comes together to sum up the last 5 years of work and establish direction for the next 5 years of work. It's the place where the most important decisions are made with maximum input and participation from the party's membership. So also in DC, next year on March 24th and 25th, will be the historic first annual International Convention of the African National Women's Organization, themed Building the Revolutionary Capacity of African Women. It will showcase the international scope of working class African women on the front lines of the revolution, leading and building a future free from colonial domination. So those are the announcements. We can open it up for Q&A. And Penny, would you like to take the lead here? Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Thank you, Carrie. And wow, what a great response tonight, and all the new members and upgrades. I just really want to thank everybody. And we heard some amazing presentations tonight. Again, I want to salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Akilé Anai, and I want to open it up. This was so much to hear, to learn about, to hear the science of the African Revolution, and I would like to open this up for anybody who has comment, discussion, question for Chairman Akilé. Yes, Rich.
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you very much for the presentation and the information. So some of you have been talking about capitalism and imperialism, as if it's like in its death throes and it's about to collapse and implode and this new world's going to come afterward. I haven't heard very much about what that new world would look like politically, economically. So I'm just kind of get a sense of the long-term kind of political, economic goals, I guess, of the movement.
Chairman, did you?
Carrie.
First thing I would like to do is just express my appreciation to Comrade Carrie.
Yes.
Because that's a bold woman.
Yes, she is. Yes, she
I
is.
remember when we first
was
first told that there was an organizer
for
the Solidarity Movement here in Huntsville, and I just thought what a brave person this woman was, and she took it on and has been building, and I've been quite impressed with that. So I want to. we don't have an exact blueprint for what the world is going to look like, but you're looking at the trailer in here. Understand? You don't have the whole movie, but you're looking at the trailer in here, because we're recreating the basis for genuine relationships between people.
Yes.
And these relationships can only come as a consequence of the process of destroying the structures that keep people separated. And essential to these structures that keep people separated is this whole economic system of capitalism and everything that's been put in place to protect capitalism. That's everything from NATO to your local cop. That's the attitudes that people have. And the part of this whole struggle to change that also contributes to changing the attitudes that we have in the world. But I want to be clear. Karl Marx and Lenin and people like that talked about something that they call primitive communism, or primitive accumulation, in the process of defining what they consider the history of the world and the development of the world economy as it exists today. And what they meant by that was there was a time in history where human beings did, in fact, as they understood it, share collectively. It was not like some individual or some group of individuals owned what was produced by the collective. And that's what we're fighting for. They called it primitive when we were doing it. But he had a plan where, from his perspective, the real thing was going to happen after Europe went through this whole process, and then it's going to be a real thing. So they call it communism. But it is the whole thing about the world without exploitation and oppression.
Yes.
And the end of that oppression and exploitation is based on the people who work and produce value now collectively controlling that value and being the primary forces in the society itself. So we're talking about that kind of society. And let me just say that I know that in this world, in this system we live in, there's a whole bunch of prejudice against the idea even that human beings can have a society where people are not all the time at each other's throats. In fact, Africans are constantly condemned in this country around the world because we think collectively. They say you can't do anything because you think of the group first. And in order to be successful, they say, you got to think like individuals. And it's what individuals do that spurs the society forward. And we say that's nonsense.
That's right.
And that most people in the world have thought collectively and created collectively, and that's Europe's intervention that's changed that, that's transformed that. So we're talking about that kind of world, where the people collectively own and control the means of production, that they don't belong to individuals, and they don't belong to corporations, etc. That's the kind of world we're looking at. And that's real. Talking about a world where once the working class comes to power, we have no interest. The working class has no interest in exploiting anybody. Our objective is not to exploit anybody. We just want benefit of what it is that we produce collectively. And that means that you don't have to worry about whether a mine is safe or not, whether it's, send somebody into a mine that's unsafe because they work for some corporation. The workers make the decision of whether that mine is safe enough for us to go into. And that's the kind of society we're looking at. We're looking for a society where the kinds of prejudices in terms of social relationships can be destroyed. For example, this whole thing about the oppression of women, which is one of the, you think about this, the oppression of the human being that gives birth to the species. You understand? How horrible is that? How crazy, ridiculous, and how crazy do people have to be made about the factors that oppress them? So we're talking about ending that. And how you end that, you're talking about practicality. Because women don't need to be dependent on anybody. And we have to create societies and structures where women have as much opportunity and ability, and partially as a consequence of being in control of the process with men, that of that kind of equality, so that a woman doesn't have to depend on a man to live. You don't even know if you're in love or not. If you would depend on somebody, you think you're in love, but you've got to be in love because you got to pay the bills. You understand? But in fact, if women have access to resources, who can live? And the other thing beyond that, we're talking about a society where what is a marriage? What is that kind of relationship? It's in such stress and disorder as it is. People need to have the ability to define what relationships they're going to have. You know, who's going to be in the relationship, etc. And the only thing that the state would have to say about that is to prevent incest and, to have rules and regulations so incest doesn't prevail. But human beings, grown people, ought to be able to say who's going to be in the relationship. And people can come in and out of it like they want to come in and out of it and not held to it based on some artificial structures and traditions that have been created and imposed on the rest of us. We're talking about human beings being free. Effectively is what it is that we're talking about, And so I know that's not the best answer because there is no blueprint. We're talking about doing something that's never been done before, Yeah,
well, then what would you say to what happened to other kind of socialist, state-centered socialist states, like Cuba, the Soviet Union, China?
Good question.
Some people have argued that basically what ends up happening is there's a new ruling class that ends up taking over in those societies. It ends up being the Communist Party-controlled state, and they end up being the new ruling class. They own the means of production, and the class relations kind of repeat themselves.
Yeah, that's a real important and valid issue that gets raised all the time. And what the difference is this, that Marx made a prediction of what it would take for communism to come about in the world. And he saw this as this progression, this vertical progression in human history, moving from one stage to the other. But the problem with Marx's description of how it worked was he couldn't get from capitalism to communism without creating this thing he called the primitive accumulation of capital. What is the primitive accumulation of capital? He said it is the turning of Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of black skins. He said it was what England did to China. It was this whole process of oppressing everybody else on earth. He said that what he referred to as wage slavery, which is an interesting concept, wage slavery required as a pedestal slavery pure and simple in the New World. In other words, the progress that he was talking about was a European progress that rested on the enslavement of Africans and everybody else on earth. So why didn't it work? This thing that they called communist in Cuba or any place else. Because in the final analysis, the basis for the advent of communism in the real world is the destruction of the pedestal upon which capitalism rests, and that is the liberation of oppressed and of peoples all around the world. Because we live in a world today where 80% of the people, human beings on the planet Earth, try to survive off 10 or less US dollars a day. 50% try to survive off $2.50 or less a day. And if you're looking at Africa, you're lucky if you get a meal a day. That's the way the structure of the world is. That's the one that Marx did not anticipate, could not even address. He talked about primitive accumulation. I'm not a damn primitive accumulation. So he defined a certain parasitic relationship that was the basis for the emergence of capitalism. And from this capitalism was going to be a communism. Can't work that way. We are now finally at a place in history where the advent of communism is being made real by what's happening in places like Afghanistan and Iraq and places around the world. Cuba couldn't survive. The Russian Revolution, which was really important, but it was not based on the historical basis for communism existing. The Russian Revolution was based on the political conditions for communists to seize power. And that's different. And so you had socialists in power, but the conditions for the existence of communism did not exist. That's different. And so we're on the cusp of something big now, and that's what we're talking about. Yes. And Marx wasn't able to have this discussion because even as he was tussling over capital, and he worked hard. Marx is a hard-working, writing guy. You understand that? Carbuncles and all of that. And he was supported by the son of this very rich man, Frederick Engels. And Frederick Engels was made rich of his father, in part, and textile and cotton. And the cotton that Frederick Ingalls his father got, was picked by black people in Mississippi and Alabama and all of these other places. So you got Marx writing Capital, talking about how the workers are going to be free, that's being funded by black people who are picking cotton in Alabama. He did not have us in mind when he wrote that, and that was the weakness of what he did. So now the cotton pickers are the ones who are setting the record straight and saying this is the real condition for the rise of communism in the world. Cuba couldn't make it. And even the Soviet Union. What you had in the Soviet Union, you had this entity that was surrounded by a sea of sharks that attacked it. Immediately after it came to power, it was attacked by all kinds of countries, including the United States. And that helped to distort it even more. So, anyway, but peoples around the world are engaged in struggle. And it's not going to be simple or easy. Because even in our party, there are contradictions in our party. You know, to tell somebody that what it is that we have to become is absolutely different from the prevailing notions of what you're supposed to be. And it's difficult to make that happen. But it's happening, and more people are being won to it every day. Yes, comrade. Yeah. Yes.
Bouncing off this question, there's a new model of capitalism emerging, which is not the traditional ways. It's called conscious capitalism, and it's based on triple bottom line, meaning happiness of people, happiness of planet, like doing environmentally friendly things to the planet to actually improve it, and profit. But it's the traditional way, which we were talking about, that is definitely destructive. It's like a balloon expanding and finally it's going to burst, it's going to die. It's like a boss leading many people and owning that production. But this is a leader who has an idea, but that's being implemented with a group of people, and it's adaptive. It's not like I'm the boss, you listen to me, but bouncing ideas and making people happy. So an example is there's a company which was started by two guys. They went to the Amazon rainforest and they employed villagers in Ecuador and Peru, and they made them, like they didn't make them, but the area was deforested. So they had an idea to sell tea and hired villagers to plant trees, make the area better, paying them money, so making them happy, raising them out of poverty, and then selling that tea in the United States. So it's like a win-win situation.
It's not a win-win situation. I mean, you got somebody who can go to somebody's land that's been deforested and say, okay, well, here's a way you can make some money. That's not the same thing I'm talking about. If it's capitalism, it's rotten. There is no, it's conscious capitalism is Starbucks. You understand? Or, some other entity like that, because if you have a situation where commodity production prevails, and commodity production is a horrible thing, because commodity production means that everything that's produced is for trade, for sale. It's not produced for use that people need. They're planting tea to sell it, not because they need tea right there. The people then are having real power when they say, this is what we need. In Sierra Leone, got fabulous diamond mines. In Sierra Leone, we just had this huge mudslide that killed thousands of people in Sierra Leone. People didn't need any damn diamonds. They can't eat it. They don't even have infrastructure there and what have you. The people have to have the ability to determine what it is that we need. We need collard greens, lima beans. We need, all this kind of stuff. You might not even see a diamond when the people come to power, because a diamond has no intrinsic value at all. It's a false value that's being created by people, so you can wear it on your finger and play like it's, something significant. So that's what I'm saying. That's not what I'm talking about, because that's what Bill Gates, the big philanthropist, who can actually set the terms for what the economy of a country is going to be like, because he's going to come in and give you something. He drops more money into the economy than people have comes from the gross domestic product. And that sets the terms for what the economy is going to look like. And the tea sets there, you're making the people happy by giving them tea. Unless it's that kind of tea that they're selling legally in Colorado today. The thing is that's not what I'm talking about. That's not power to the people. People have to set their own goals based on what it is that we need as people, not some beneficent stranger dropping in and say, hey, I'll pay you to plant.